Today we're taking a wild ride back to the 1970s, a time when bell-bottoms were in, disco was king, and car manufacturers were experimenting like never before. It was an era of innovation, but not all ideas were winners. Some were downright dangerous, leaving us with valuable lessons about the importance of safety and practicality in automotive design. Join me as we explore 15 car features from the 1970s that thankfully didn't survive the test of time, why they existed, how they performed, and what they taught us. Let's begin with water balloon bumpers. Imagine driving a car with bumpers filled with water. Yes, water. This wasn't a bizarre prank. It was a genuine safety experiment that gained some traction in the mid-20th century, with experimentation peaking in the 1950s and 1960s. By the early 1970s, the concept had largely faded, but not before making an impact. Pun intended. The idea behind water-filled bumpers was simple. Water is nearly incompressible, which makes it great for absorbing energy during a collision. Engineers theorized that by filling a car's bumpers with water, or a water antifreeze mix, they could soften the blow in minor accidents, potentially saving lives and reducing repair costs. Manufacturers like Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler experimented with the concept. The bumpers were typically made of a flexible material like rubber or plastic and included a hollow chamber to hold the water. When the car hit something, the water would distribute the force of the impact, theoretically protecting both the vehicle and its occupants. While the idea sounded promising, the execution left much to be desired. The bumpers often leaked or ruptured in real-world crashes, rendering them useless. They added significant weight to vehicles, which not only hurt fuel efficiency, but also made cars harder to handle. Additionally, the bumpers didn't provide adequate protection in high-speed collisions, a reality that became increasingly clear as crash testing evolved. By the 1970s, water balloon bumpers were abandoned in favor of more robust solutions like crumple zones and impact-absorbing materials such as polyurethane. This failed experiment taught the industry an important lesson. Safety features must be durable, reliable, and effective across a wide range of scenarios, not just ideal conditions. Next up is an innovation that aimed to redefine how we interact with our cars: the wrist twist steering control. Developed by Ford and implemented in its Mercury brand during the late 1960s, this design was an ambitious attempt to rethink the traditional steering wheel. Instead of a circular wheel, the wrist twist system featured two horizontal 5-inch dials mounted on either side of the driver. Drivers would rotate these dials to steer the car, while the system's low placement offered a clearer view of the dashboard and instruments. Ford touted this as the future of driving, claiming it would reduce driver fatigue and improve visibility. But in practice, the wrist twist system was anything but intuitive. Traditional steering wheels allow for easy control, especially during emergency maneuvers where quick, instinctual reactions are required. The wrist twist dual-dial setup was confusing, requiring drivers to retrain their muscle memory and adapt to a counterintuitive system. Additionally, the lack of tactile feedback, a key feature of conventional wheels, made it difficult for drivers to gauge their steering inputs. Real-world tests revealed just how impractical the wrist twist was. Drivers struggled to maintain control, particularly at high speeds or in situations requiring rapid adjustments. Safety concerns quickly outweighed the potential benefits, and the system was quietly shelved by the mid-1970s. Its short life serves as a reminder that not all innovations are improvements, and intuitive design is crucial for driver safety. As automakers focused on reducing injuries in the event of a crash, they briefly toyed with a controversial concept: neck-hugging seat belts. These experimental belts emerged in the 1960s as an attempt to address whiplash injuries, which occur when the head snaps backward during a rear-end collision. The idea was bold but flawed. Instead of restraining the chest and torso like traditional seat belts, neck-hugging belts looped snugly around the driver's or passenger's neck. This was meant to prevent the violent backward motion of the head, minimizing strain on the neck muscles and vertebrae. While the concept had a certain logic to it, the risk became immediately apparent. During sudden stops or high-impact collisions, the neck-hugging belt could exert enormous pressure on the neck, leading to strangulation or severe injury. The belts also failed to provide any protection for the rest of the body, leaving passengers vulnerable to impacts with the dashboard or windshield. Prototypes of these belts never made it to mass production, and by the 1970s, the industry had moved on to safer, more balanced solutions. The rise of the three-point seat belt, pioneered by Volvo in 1959, rendered neck belts obsolete. This episode highlighted the dangers of focusing too narrowly on a single aspect of safety and emphasized the need for comprehensive restraint systems. It's hard to imagine a time when headrests weren't standard in cars, but before the late 1960s, they were virtually non-existent. By the early 1970s, headrests were becoming more common, but not all vehicles featured them, leaving passengers and drivers at significant risk of whiplash during rear-end collisions. The absence of headrests meant that during sudden impacts, the neck was left unsupported, causing it to snap backward violently. This often resulted in serious injuries to the cervical spine and muscles. Swedish automaker Volvo pioneered the inclusion of headrests in the late 1960s, recognizing their importance in reducing whiplash-related injuries. By the 1970s, headrests were becoming more widely adopted, spurred on by mounting evidence from crash testing and advocacy from safety experts. The widespread adoption of headrests taught the industry a vital lesson. Even seemingly small features can make a big difference in passenger safety. Today, headrests are not just standard. They are carefully engineered to provide maximum support and protection. Few automotive features have a more sinister legacy than the non-collapsible steering column. Until the late 1960s, these rigid steel rods were standard in nearly every car, serving as a direct connection between the steering wheel and the front wheels. While they worked fine under normal conditions, their fatal flaw became evident in crashes. During a collision, the unyielding column could be pushed backward into the driver's chest, causing devastating injuries. These incidents were so common that the steering column became one of the most feared components of a car. The tide began to turn in 1967 when General Motors introduced the first collapsible steering column. This design incorporated segments that compressed upon impact, absorbing energy and reducing the risk of injury. By the 1970s, collapsible columns were standard in most cars, representing a monumental leap forward in automotive safety. The elimination of non-collapsible columns was a turning point, demonstrating how engineering ingenuity could save lives. It also underscored the importance of designing systems that account for crash dynamics, rather than merely prioritizing mechanical efficiency. The swing-away steering wheel was an innovative feature introduced by Ford in the early 1960s, most notably in the Thunderbird. Designed to enhance driver convenience, the wheel could pivot to the side when the car was parked, making it easier for drivers to enter and exit the vehicle. Initially, this feature was celebrated as a luxurious touch that added a futuristic flair to Ford's lineup. It addressed a common frustration for drivers, especially in tight spaces or for those with mobility challenges. However, beneath its glossy marketing, the swing-away steering wheel harbored significant safety concerns. The mechanism that allowed the wheel to pivot occasionally malfunctioned, failing to lock the wheel back into place after use. This could result in the wheel becoming unstable or even detaching while driving, creating a serious safety hazard. Over time, these reliability issues and the increasing emphasis on safety regulations led to the feature's demise. By the late 1970s, the swing-away steering wheel was phased out. Its story serves as a cautionary tale about the risks of prioritizing convenience over reliability, especially in safety-critical systems. Pop-out windshields were an ambitious feature introduced by Tucker in 1948 and sporadically used into the 1970s. These windshields were designed to act as an escape mechanism, detaching during a crash to allow passengers to exit the vehicle more easily. While the concept sounded promising, it was fraught with dangers. In serious accidents, the pop-out windshields often ejected occupants rather than protecting them, dramatically increasing the risk of fatalities. The design also compromised the structural integrity of the vehicle, making it less safe in rollovers. And as safety standards evolved, the industry moved toward laminated glass windshields, which remained intact during crashes while still allowing emergency escape if needed. The failure of pop-out windshields reinforced the importance of keeping passengers contained within the vehicle, a cornerstone of modern automotive safety. The 1970s saw a widespread use of dash-mounted ignition switches, a feature that seemed practical at the time, but turned out to have unforeseen safety risks. Placed directly on the dashboard, These ignition switches made it easy for drivers to start their vehicles while seated comfortably. However, in the event of a crash, their positioning and rigid design became a hazard. During collisions, drivers or passengers could be thrown forward, striking the sharp protrusion of the ignition switch. This often caused severe injuries to the chest or head. Additionally, the placement of the switch made it more vulnerable to being damaged during an accident, which could lead to electrical fires or even render the vehicle inoperable in a dangerous situation. The eventual shift of ignition systems to the steering column during the 1970s significantly mitigated these risks. The steering column placement kept the switch further from the driver's and passenger's direct path in a collision, improving overall safety. This change, along with the later advent of push-button ignitions, showcased how ergonomic and safety-focused design could work hand-in-hand to enhance the driving experience. Early automobiles weren't built with passenger safety in mind, and nowhere was this more evident than in the metal dashboards that dominated car interiors until the late 1960s. These hard, unforgiving panels were durable and easy to manufacture, but posed a significant risk in crashes. Passengers who collided with the dashboard faced severe head, chest, and knee injuries, as the unyielding surface offered no energy absorption. By the 1970s, padded dashboards covered in vinyl or other soft materials became more common. This shift was driven by mounting evidence from crash tests and real-world accidents, which highlighted the dangers of rigid interiors. The decline of metal dashboards marked an important step toward prioritizing passenger safety over aesthetics. Lap-only seatbelts were one of the earliest attempts at passenger restraint, widely introduced in the 1940s and 1950s. While they prevented ejections, they failed to protect the upper body, leaving passengers vulnerable to head, neck, and chest injuries. By the 1970s, the three-point seatbelt, developed by Volvo engineer Niels Bohlin in 1959, had become the gold standard. This design evenly distributed crash forces across the chest, pelvis, and shoulders, providing far better protection. The transition from lap belts to three-point systems underscored the importance of comprehensive safety measures and the need for constant innovation. In the 1970s, the compact Ford Pinto became infamous for its fuel tank design, which was placed directly behind the rear axle. This positioning made the tank vulnerable to punctures and rear-end collisions, sometimes causing fires that turned the vehicle into a death trap. Despite knowing the dangers, Ford calculated that paying damages and lawsuits was cheaper than fixing the design flaw, a decision exposed in the infamous Pinto memo. Over 27 deaths were directly linked to this design failure, leading to recalls and a wave of litigation. The Pinto scandal forced automakers to reevaluate how cost-saving measures could backfire, both ethically and financially, and emphasized the critical importance of crash testing and thorough safety assessments. Before the 1970s, cars were designed with rigid frames to withstand impacts, but this had unintended consequences. Without crumple zones, engineered areas of the vehicle designed to absorb crash energy, the force of an impact transferred directly to passengers, causing severe injuries. It wasn't until manufacturers like Mercedes-Benz introduced crumple zones in the 1960s that the industry began to rethink vehicle structure. By the 1970s, crumple zones were being implemented across the board, significantly improving crash survivability. Their absence in earlier vehicles highlighted how rigidity could be more harmful than helpful in automotive design. In the mid-20th century, cars were as much about style as function, and dashboard ornaments were a staple of interior design. These ranged from decorative knobs to intricate metal sculptures, including clocks, compasses, and thermometers. While aesthetically pleasing, these ornaments were poorly considered when it came to passenger safety. During a collision, these rigid, often sharp objects turned into projectiles or hazards that could cause severe injuries to passengers. In the absence of airbags and seatbelts, which were not yet mandatory in many cars, these dashboard adornments often compounded the risk during accidents. The placement and materials used prioritized aesthetics over any consideration of how they might behave in a crash. As safety standards evolved in the 1970s, these features began to disappear. The shift to padded dashboards and a growing awareness of crash dynamics rendered ornamental dashboards obsolete. This transition highlighted the necessity of considering safety in every aspect of a vehicle's design, no matter how seemingly trivial. Anti-lock braking systems, ABS, were first developed for aircraft in the 1950s, but didn't become common in passenger vehicles until much later. In the 1970s, most cars still lacked ABS, which prevented wheels from locking up during hard braking. Without this technology, drivers faced increased risks of losing control on wet or icy roads. Pioneers like Chrysler introduced rudimentary ABS in the 1970s, but it wasn't until the 1980s and 1990s that the system became standard. The lack of ABS in the 1970s underscored the importance of technological advancement and widespread adoption of life-saving features. Before the advent of modern dual-circuit braking systems, many cars in the 1970s still relied on single-circuit brake systems. In these designs, the entire braking system was dependent on a single hydraulic circuit. While this setup worked under ideal conditions, it presented a catastrophic risk if the system failed. In the event of a leak or rupture in the hydraulic lines, the brakes could completely fail, leaving the driver with no way to stop the vehicle. This flaw was particularly hazardous in larger cars and trucks, which were prevalent during the 1970s and required significant braking power to halt their momentum. Manufacturers began transitioning to dual-circuit brake systems during the late 1960s and 1970s. These systems divided the braking mechanism into two independent circuits, one for the front wheels and one for the rear. If one circuit failed, the other could still provide partial braking power, significantly improving safety. The push for dual-circuit brakes was largely driven by evolving safety regulations and consumer demand for more reliable vehicles. This transition marked a critical step in braking technology and underscored the importance of redundancy in safety-critical systems. It also paved the way for further advancements such as the anti-lock braking systems, ABS, mentioned above, which are now standard in most vehicles. The 1970s were a pivotal decade for automotive design, a time when ambition often outpaced practicality. While many of the features we've explored failed to deliver on their promises, each played a role in shaping the safer, more reliable cars we drive today. These stories remind us that progress often comes through trial and error, and that every failure brings us closer to success. Thanks for joining me on this journey through automotive history. Stay safe, and I'll see you next time.